eventually on December 16th, they went out onto Plymouth Harbor, where they settled on location on December 21st. But weather kept them from starting construction on their homes until December 23rd. How would you like to start home construction on December 23rd in Massachusetts? Ooh. There had been this cartographer, this mapping guy named John Smith, you heard of him, who had been there earlier and named the area New Plymouth. They decided to keep the name. The winter was harsh, freezing temperatures, some disease. Of course, lack of shelter, all they had was the boat and what they were able to get built. And of the 130 or so original passengers, by the end of that winter, only 53 of them will have survived. Of the 18 women, 13 of them will have died, including William Bradford's wife, who fell overboard while he was on land scouting, doing some work, fell into the icy cold water and drowned within minutes. But God never gave up on this, and the colonists never gave up on their God. On March 16, 1621, a man named Samoset walked into their village. He had learned English previously when he had been captured and re-released by English fishermen in present-day Maine. But he couldn't speak the English near as good as his friend Squanto could. Squanto had been captured in 1605 and returned home for good in 1619. He actually made 6 trips across the Atlantic in his lifetime. And some amazing adventures of him and some divine providence in his life as well. But when he had returned home, his people had been wiped out. Some disease, plague, something. They were all dead and gone. And so he was now living with Chief Massasoit and his tribe. And Samoset had gone back and told Squanto, hey, there are people here who have landed and are settling and building stuff where your tribe used to be. He said, well, I want to meet them. And so they did. And they came in and visited. And he was ecstatic that someone was now going to live in the tribal land of his ancestors. Now, in all of the entire eastern seaboard here of this new world, about how many places do you think there are that the Pilgrims could have just happened to land where the natives had abandoned it, was good area, and there just happened to be one who could speak fluent English to help them along? What are the odds? Well, Squanto is thrilled with them. He doesn't want to leave. He's like, can I just kind of stay here with you all? And they're like, sure, we could use all the help we can. And he would attend their services, their assembly that they would have on Sundays. And how they treated one another, how they treated him and the other natives greatly impacted him to the point that he wanted to be a part of this faith that they had. And thus he became a Christian. In fact, one time he'll be captured by a rival tribe, and Miles Standish and the others will lead a group to go rescue him because of how important he was to them. And when he does, William Bradford shares with him the story of Joseph and how he too had been captured or sent into bonds of slavery, kind of, but God worked it out for his good, and the Lord can work this out for your good as well. And they became very, very close friends. The colonists had very good relations with the natives. Through the love of Christ, they worked to evangelize them. In return, the natives worked side by side with the Pilgrims, helping them, giving them pointers on everything, extra provisions if they needed it, showing them all the surroundings. And the harvest of 1621, 401 years ago, they all got together, most likely in October, 90 warrior men and the 53 colonists for a 3-day celebration. Now, I'm assuming that the men there, having 90 warrior men show up and hang around for 3 days, might have been a little intimidating. You're outnumbered 3 to 1. But they brought enough venison enough deer meat to eat all 3 days. They're like, oh, yeah, you guys are good. All right, we're good. We're buddies now. So everything was going really wonderful. But problems came with the arrival of a ship called the Fortune in November of 1621. 37 settlers arrived, including some of the separatists who weren't able to make it originally on the Mayflower. William Brewster's own son Jonathan was able to finally join them. And the merchant adventurers had sent new instructions on how the colony was to be conducted. They wanted to make sure that there was good output from the colony to be sent back to England so they could make a profit. And the contract of the colony now stated that no individual could own any plot of land for the first 7 years. In fact, the plots of land were to be rotated amongst the families every year. So all the effort you put into that tract of land this year, do you get to harvest any of it the following year? No. Well, what happens if you arrive on a tract of land that had nothing done with it? Well, how much effort do you want to put into it knowing you're not going to get it next year? All the supplies that were harvested were to go into the common house in the middle of the colony and then be distributed evenly amongst all the colonists. It didn't really matter how much you had produced to put into that common store either. From the very beginning, a socialist mentality referred to as communalism by Bradford was trying to infiltrate this new world. They soon realized there was not going to be enough food to last the winter. What were they to do? Well, the council gathered together, and their newly elected governor, William Bradford, all agreed the answer was in the Bible. And just as John Smith had done 15 years earlier, they too were going to live by the principle of 2 Thessalonians 3:10, that if you don't work, you don't eat. Let me give you Bradford's own words on how this all went down. He wrote this: "And after they began to come into wants, many sold away their clothes and bed coverings. Others, so base were they, became servants to the Indians and would cut the wood and fetch the water for a cap full of corn. Others fell to plain stealing, both night and day from the Indians, of which they grievously complained." I don't blame them. "In the end, they came to that misery that some starved and died with cold and hunger. One, in gathering shellfish, was so weak as he stuck fast in the mud and was found dead in place," sitting there, standing stuck in the mud, frozen to death. "All this, while no supply was heard of, neither knew they when they might expect any. So they began to think how they might raise as much corn as they could and obtain a better crop than they had done, that they might not still thus languish in misery. At length, after much debate of things, the governor, with the advice of the chiefest among them, gave way that they should set corn, every man for his own particular, and in that regard trust to themselves, and all other things to go on in the general way as before, and so assign to every family a parcel of land according to the proportion of their number for that end, only for present use, but made no division for inheritance, and ranged all boys and youth under some family." So here's what we're going to do. You know how you've been rotating those tracts of land? We're not going to do that. You're going to get them. And here's your allotment of seed. Plant whatever you want. Do with it whatever you want, the whole land. And whatever comes from it, you get to enjoy it. It's all yours. Yours and your family. If you produce more than you need, you can sell it or trade it. If you don't get enough, you can work hard or trade or whatever for somebody else to get what you need. But everyone's going to be in charge of themselves. And anybody here who doesn't have a family, with which we're going to get you one, you get to work with them. Okay, we'll assign you somebody if you need it. Okay, and if you don't do any of it, you're not going to get anything. And don't come begging to us, because we will not violate the Lord's command on on what we're doing here. There were some of the young men who thought, well, these Christians, they're soft. They'll give in. We don't have to do anything. They'll help us out. After about 7 days of no food, they started working. Here's how Bradford wrote it. This had very good success, for it made all hands very industrious, so as much more corn was planted than otherwise would have been by any means the governor and any other could use, and saved him a great deal of trouble and gave far better content. The women now went willingly into the field and took their little ones with them to set corn, which before would allege weakness and inability. Whom to have compelled would have been thought great tyranny and oppression. See, the ladies are like, I ain't going up there and working on that land if it's just going to be going to somebody else. I'm not working for some other husband. I'm too weak today. I just can't go out today. And I like how Bradford said it. If trying to force them, it would be considered great tyranny. Apparently nothing's changed in 400 years. So, this is how it went. Well, now everybody's willing to go and work because they will harvest the fruits of their labor. Well, the experience that was had in this common course and condition, tried sundry years, that amongst godly and sober men, may well evince the vanity of that conceit of Plato's and other ancients, applauded by some of latter times, that the taking away of property and bringing in community into a commonwealth would make them happy and flourishing as if they were wiser than God. You hear what William Bradford says? That if you try this whole communal thing, where if you work, you don't work, we're just going to spread it all around evenly to everybody. He says that is the wisdom of pagan philosophers, not the wisdom of God. See, what are we trying to do in our society and government today? And what are we also saying about the counsel of God in our society today? It's not linked, is it? For this community, so far as it was found to breed much confusion and discontent when they tried it this way, and retard much employment that would have been to their benefit and comfort. For the young men that were most able and fit for labor and service did reply that they should spend their time in straight to work for other men's wives and children without any recompense. They would just spend their time chasing girls and playing and horsing around instead of working, because they knew they were going to get fed anyway. Why should I have to work? Strong or men of parts had no more in division of victuals, food supplies, and clothes than he that was weak and not able to do a quarter of the other could. This was thought injustice. The aged and greater men to be ranked and equalized in labors and victuals, clothes, etc., with the meaner and younger sort, thought it some indignity of disrespect unto them. That was. And for men's wives to be commanded to do service for other men, as dressing their meat, washing their clothes, etc., they deemed it a kind of slavery, neither could many husbands well brook it. Upon the point, all being to have alike, and all to do alike, they thought themselves in the like condition, and one as good as another. And so, if it did not cut of those relations that God hath set amongst men, yet it did at least much diminish and take of the mutual respects that should be preserved amongst them, and would have been worse if they had been men of another condition. Let none object. This is men's corruption. And nothing to the course itself. I answer, seeing all men have this corruption in them, God in his wisdom saw another course fitter for them. From these extremities, the Lord in his goodness kept these his people, and in their great wants preserved both their lives and healths. Let his name have the praise. Amen. From then on, the colony flourished. It became a starting point and a training center for other new arrivals, new colonists. The Puritans are going to make their big migration to the New World coming up in a few years. It was then in 1623, Everything was looking so good. We've got this down pat now. Everything's going well. When from the 3rd week of May to the middle of July, no rain. They thought they were in Oklahoma. Corn began to wither. Not looking good because, there's no store to go buy extra. This is it. They knew there was one thing to do. What was that? Pray. So they had a day of prayer and fasting. And Bradford, I'm going to show you what he writes here. If he had an umbrella, he would have brought it with him. That was his faith. And here's what he said. When they started the day, not a cloud in the sky, not even a glimpse of one. But that night, after their full day of prayer and fasting, he writes, it began to overcast, and shortly after to rain, with such sweet and gentle showers as gave them cause of rejoicing and blessing God. It came without either wind or thunder or any violence, because what would that have done? If this had been a big storm, it just would have destroyed it. And by degrees of that abundance, as that the earth was thoroughly wet and soaked therewith, didn't erode it away, wash it all out. Which did so apparently revive and quicken the decayed corn and other fruits as wonderful to see, and made the Indians astonished to behold. It was like right before their eyes, the corn just whoop, was lush once again, to the amazement and bewilderment of the natives. Who is this God whom you serve? And afterwards the Lord sent them such seasonable showers with interchange of fair, warm weather, as through his blessing caused a fruitful and liberal harvest, to their no small comfort and rejoicing, for which mercy, in time convenient, they also set apart a day of thanksgiving. And that is how this nation was founded. How the first Thanksgiving came about. Because of dependence upon God's word, full faith and assurance in him, giving him all the praise and honor, including a special day of thanksgiving unto God. If it had not been, in my estimation, divinely sent storms in England and America at just the right times, these things may not have happened. And we would not have the tremendous bounty of the richest, freest nation to ever exist, for which we could enjoy and have our own special day of Thanksgiving. So monumental is this history that they are enshrined in the rotunda of the U.S. Capitol. From 1819 to 1855, large paintings, 8 of them, were commissioned and hung in the rotunda, amongst many other smaller reliefs and paintings, to commemorate the foundational events of the American nation. This is what founded us. The 8 paintings include the presentation of the Declaration of Independence, the landing of Columbus, the discovery of the Mississippi, Lewis and Clark, the victory at Saratoga, the victory at Yorktown, General George Washington's resignation of his commission. We'll talk about that in one of our upcoming seminars, why that is so monumental in the affairs of mankind. And the remaining 2, the conversion of Pocahontas and the embarkation of the Pilgrims for the New World. So think of that. Of the 8 large paintings in the Capitol's rotunda, commemorating the most important moments leading to the establishment of the American nation, 2 of them, conversion of Pocahontas to Christianity, and the journey of the Pilgrims seeking religious freedom. See what we've seen here tonight in our American family? We've seen the absolute devotion to God and his word prove to be fruitful. the pursuit of religious freedom, the adherence to Christian principles and morals, saving our children from a culture that takes them away from that, the rejection of socialism and the overwhelming success of free enterprise, and we've seen also divine intervention in the establishment of this new nation. Now, as I conclude, I must say that in the world in which we live today, it is not un-American to voice one's opinion, to speak out for what one desires, or to pursue political changes. Okay? No matter what your political spectrum or beliefs are, whatever you're trying to accomplish. But I do want us to understand this, that what one may be advocating for may be un-American by definition of our founding. Anything that is the opposite of the values of what we've seen tonight, religious freedom, capitalism, hard work, Christian principles, anything opposite of that by definition is not American. That being said, we often will pray in our churches and our prayer groups for revival in America, to turn back to God and to her godly roots, to her American heritage. And that's wonderful, that's good. But understand from history what we've seen even tonight. None of that starts in the State House, nor a White House. I would even maintain it can't even really start in a church house. I suggest to you it will not start until the fathers in the houses of Christian homes stand up and say, we will live by the traditional American values, which, guess what, are biblical, godly virtues. You want to know why they attack our history? It's because of its foundation. It's a biblical one. Who else's foundation is the Word of God? So understand, an attack on the American founding is also an attack on the Lord's church. That's what's going on here. That's why we do this in our ministry. So we would realize these things. Because the values that we teach to the next generation, that hard work is a virtue, that solemn devotion to God and the Lord's day is essential, and obedience to His Word is vital. Christian morals are never to be compromised. They are values that cherish Christ and serving Him above all, which is why the opponents of the American founding are so vehement in either rewriting it or erasing it. And why we do this tonight. Because sadly, the opposite is true in our culture today. The values of self-interest, self-pleasure, that's cherished above all. How important is the Lord's Day assembly? Or is a soccer game or practice for a sports team more important? Meeting together around the Lord's Day. So will there be revival in the land? Well, you have to answer this question.